You're in for a treat today. Jenna Beltser is the program director at the Jewish Women Entrepreneur and Executive, the JWE, the professional network for Jewish women. After a career in investment banking at Goldman Sachs and in the Fintech startup scene, Jenna went on to be the founding director of the Orthodox Union's Impact Accelerator. Most notably for us, Jenna is a MEOR Penn alumna and shares some of the impactful experiences as well as powerful and practical Jewish wisdom she received through and since MEOR's fellowship. Enjoy. Welcome to Realizing Potential, where we explore self-actualization through the journeys, perspectives, and transformative insights of Jewish leaders across the globe. Jenna Beltser, welcome to Realizing Potential. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be part of this.
So there is a ton we can explore. I know we can't touch more than the tip of the iceberg, but to start off, I would love for you to just share with the listeners who you are and what you do today.
For sure. So my name is Jenna Beltser, and I currently live in Boca Raton, Florida, with my husband and my 2 children. I grew up on Long Island, and I got involved with MEOR at the University of Pennsylvania. After going to Penn, I went originally into investment banking and then fintech. I'm currently the program director for an organization called the Jewish Women Entrepreneur. And over that time, I spent time going to Israel, coming back, living in the Upper West Side, been in a lot of places. But thank God, I'm excited that they all brought me here today to this podcast.
You mentioned the JWE, so I'd love for you to jump just a little bit more deeply into what that is and then the path that kind of got you to create this thing or to be involved in it today.
For sure. So the Jewish Women Entrepreneur is an organization that was actually, I did not start it. I only got involved around a year ago. That was started in 2011 by a woman named Chaya Fishman. And the thought was that a lot of Jewish women go into entrepreneurship for 2 main reasons. One is the need for flexibility and around Jewish holidays and everything like that. And the other being unfortunately, the challenge of not having a business education. And so she started the Jewish Women Entrepreneur to create community and also education for women who are entrepreneurs. Over from 2011 to 2019, the organization was primarily an annual conference, and they had other events and programming here and there, and then COVID. And so in 2022, the organization made a comeback, both with city chapters and also fortunately earning a large grant, which allowed them to hire their first full-time professional team, which included myself and my colleague Nava. And so right now we actually call ourselves a Jewish Woman Entrepreneur and Executive, with the thought being that we really sit at this intersection between women who are trying to pursue their professional aspirations while embracing their personal values. And I can go into my career story a bit of how I got here, but I think that in the world at large, if you're at work, your personal life is kind of diminished or not necessarily seen as a strength. And then sometimes in the Jewish community, your professional aspirations may not be celebrated or may not be enjoyed or may not be promoted, especially as women. And so the JWE is a really unique community and space where we provide education, mentorship, community and support, where you can say, I'm someone who wants to be successful in my career, and I'm someone who also cares about my family and, wants to be there at home or wants to pursue my values. And I think that's a really unique space and something that I'm obviously drawn to and excited about building.
I'm very curious because I was on the agency side in a marketing agency when I was in the business world. And one of the things that I experienced on my team was when people were coming back from maternity leave, it was very difficult for them to feel like for us to support them as a business and within the framework of what the expectations were. And like the timelines of ramping back in or just showing up and expecting that everybody's ready to go 100%. And I remember going through, like the first time I went through that as a manager, seeing, the eye-opening aspect of, even though I have a wife and I have kids, but I wasn't on that side, I couldn't appreciate it till I saw one of my employees go through that. So I'd love to know, was this something that's one aspect, obviously, of a bigger picture? But is this something you personally experienced and then it was a problem you wanted to go solve, or like, how did you get into it yourself?
I guess a little bit. So I'll go into my career stories. I went into investment banking after college, and I thought I was going to be doing that certainly for 20 years of my life. Well, when we get into the MEOR question, I joke sometimes that Goldman Sachs, where I started my career, allowed me to do MEOR, and I'll get there in a moment. But all my internship experience was there, and in some ways, I loved it. When I did eventually go into banking, I was working like truly 18-hour, 20-hour days to start off. And it was at the same time that I was starting to explore my personal values and think about like, what do I really want for my life? Do I want this? From like texting my parents in the car on the way home, and it was 3 a.m. Every day. But in short, I remember being there and there was a very senior woman, and someone asked her, "What are your hobbies? What are your pastimes?" And she said, "Believe it or not, I actually like hanging out with my kids." And it stuck with me through this day. It's probably over 10 years
Right.
ago. And I remember that if a senior woman has to say, like, qualify that they want to be with their family, what kind of, it doesn't work. And I remember the messages that I got throughout my career were that it was very hard to value both what you want in your personal life and in your career. And so after banking, I went to fintech. I worked at two fintech firms. And then from there, and that were both startups. And then from there, I got an opportunity. I was really volunteering for the Orthodox Union. And they were starting a new department. So it was somewhat of a startup department working with nonprofit startups. And it was called the OU Impact Accelerator. Well, we named it the OU Impact Accelerator. At the time, it was really just a new department, and they wanted to bring someone in to help build this program that they knew some of their goals, but not exactly what it would look like. And so in 2017, I joined the Orthodox Union and built a program called the OU Impact Accelerator. And then last summer, so right now it's 2023, 2022, I actually had come back from maternity leave and struggled, I think, a bit with that transition. But also, I was really in a place where either I was going to continue building the accelerator to the next level. It was 5 years in. The program was like a well-oiled machine. It ran. We had the procedures for everything. Actually, while I was we had a person right out of college running it because it was just running very smooth. So either that needed to grow or there was going to be a new opportunity. And the JWE, I actually had previous experience with Kaya Fishman, the founder, and they had reached out to me, and I was like, well, this is interesting timing. And I remember the summer, like talking all summer with my husband, is this too good to be true? Because if you were to tie a bow on my resume of someone who worked in the executive world, someone who worked in the startup world, someone who worked in the nonprofit world, who is a woman and, I don't want to say like female power and everything like that, in the good way, I guess. If you tied a bow on my resume, is this role it? And I definitely struggled a bit when I first started in the JWE, but it seemed like that type of opportunity to really help be part of something that I believe so strongly in, going back to some of those original experiences I had in banking, where I personally felt like I couldn't balance my personal values and what I wanted in my personal life and what I wanted in my professional life.
So it's interesting because you just described the situation in which like each of those experiences culminated coming together to like make a lot of sense when this presented itself, that there's like a recognition this might be a good fit because it pulls together these disparate experiences. You wouldn't necessarily take, XU Penn investment banker, OU, and then be like, okay, I'm going to have something that pulls those two things together. Did you feel through those different experiences that they were coming together? Did they feel until this experience now pulled them together that they were like
Um,
totally separate?
It's funny you say that because reflecting back, I actually do think every step made sense. So when I was leaving banking and looking for my next opportunity, I went into fintech, and I remember two things. One is that it seemed like a really idealistic version of finance, which is kind of like the startup vibe of it. Not that banking is not so idealistic. Let's call it spade a spade, but it was an idealistic version. And also at the time, I remember on my interview, seeing a demo of the technology and thinking about the technology that we use. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This really is cutting edge and, focus on innovation. The second fintech firm, it was really a few of my colleagues from the first firm had gone to the second firm. I actually went to Israel in between the two. And so when I came back, they wanted to bring me on to this new role. So fintech as a bubble felt like it made sense. And then the Orthodox Union did make sense because it was really, the way I always described it was this marriage between always having been a do-gooder, wanting to help the community and doing good things. I'm the community at large, all the way from like running the blood drives in my high school, to having worked in the startup world and being scrappy and understanding what that means and wanting to build new programs. And so each step it's funny, again, I hadn't reflected on it so much, but each step did seem to make sense. But the current one feeling a little bit like taking a piece of each of them and putting them together. And I have to admit, like I do rely on all of those experiences every day in my role at the JWE, whether it be like I'm, playing geography, not Jewish geography, but a little bit like who's who from my banking days with someone who I'm trying to recruit, or talking about things that I've learned in the fintech firm. So really, I do take from each of those positions in my current role. But I think most people usually have to take what they've learned from different places in their current career roles.
Yeah, no, I definitely would agree with that. I've heard that from a number of people, and it's amazing when somebody can recognize and see all of it, because it doesn't always make sense until it makes sense. But I want to pivot quickly to
Yeah.
going back to, as you mentioned, your experience in MEOR. Obviously, that's why we're here on the podcast, and you were involved on campus at UPenn. I would love to go back to that time when you decided to apply to be a fellow, part of the MEOR Fellowship, and just tell us what inspired you to do it, and what was your experience in the program?
For sure. So there are two things that inspired me to do more. The first is that I was starting to get involved with Judaism on campus, mainly through I had a lot of friends who kept Shabbat or who were doing different things that were Jewish that were somewhat foreign to me. And so I'd say throughout my college experience, I was trying to learn more about this religion that not barely knew growing up, but was not so close with growing up. An example of that, I remember my college year, my freshman year, there were guys who were applying for fraternities. And I remember one of them saying that they made fun of him for wearing tefillin. And I remember saying, "What's tefillin?" And he thought and he was embarrassed because he was going through this experience of applying for fraternities where they're like making fun of him for being so religious. And I was truly curious what tefillin were, and I didn't know. Um, my parents would probably be upset that I didn't know what tefillin were, but anyway, so there was definitely my own feeling of inadequacy on college campus, and I got involved with a lot of different programs. And the second, where I mentioned earlier that banking allowed me to become religious, was that I remember specifically, I came back from studying abroad in South Africa, the fall of my junior year, and I was at a campus community fair, and Rabbi Lynn Shwolin came up to me and he was like, "How about you do more this semester?" And I remember because I already had the internship locked in for the summer and in banking, which all of my friends would be applying for that spring because of previous programs I did. I was like, I really have no excuse not to. All my friends are going to be doing OCR on campus recruiting every night. What am I going to be doing every night? Because they're not going to be available. I
Wow.
guess I should do more. I guess I should do more. So I did so, and it was great for many reasons, and I can go into that. But when I did join MEOR program, the thing that was so special about it, and I think the reason why I connected with it so much, is that it felt like one of the first things that I had done where there was no external validation or grade for anything that I was doing. So in high school, I was the president of my high school. I got all A pluses in the honors classes, like typical Penn student. And whether or not I was doing that for me or for outside, it still looks good, let's say, from the outside. There was certainly external validation for what I was doing. And I'd say that similarly, going into banking, especially at Penn, it's a popular choice there, that the MEOR classes were the first time that I think I kind of felt like there was no grade. I wasn't going to get an A plus at the end of it. I wasn't going to get an F at the end of it. It was just purely for myself and purely for my own enrichment and learning and growth. And whether or not I did have other things like that in my life, I certainly didn't connect to them in the same way that I did with MEOR. So
Wow.
that was something that meant a lot to me.
It's incredible. I can relate a lot. I was at NYU. We're not as prestigious as the UPenn group, but Definitely, it's an amazing experience to choose to learn. You know, you go through high school and college, and you're not learning for yourself. You're learning for a destination, and this is the first time to really dig into that. Um, you had mentioned previously in an earlier conversation that you ended up going back home after being Maor and leading your own Passover Seder.
Yeah.
What was that like?
So, Passover on a college campus, for some reason, I always connected to Passover. Like my freshman year, we did fraternity sorority, Passover Seders. Other years, the Chabad campus would sponsor the meals, and you just, you got people together. So it's something that I always related to a lot. And so my junior year, I remember I was going home for Passover, and Rabbi Yoni Spinka, he was on campus at the time. He's like, if you're going home for Passover, um, you know, let's learn about it a little bit. And I remember him taking a lot of time, like he did with many different lessons, but taking a lot of time to help me learn about Passover and the Seder and bring ideas home with me. And it was actually very special for many reasons. One is that my Passover Seder growing up was often, we got together. We usually would say the 4 questions, read a little bit of the story, and then kind of get to the meal. And so this was really special. And even my family appreciated that I was bringing home a few of these ideas of, making sure we do matzah more koresh for the Seder, and just making sure that we have some of the things, to the point that, granted, the story changed a little bit later, but I remember at different times during my time at Penn, my mother even said to me, like, maybe one of the reasons you came to Penn was for you to discover Judaism in the way that you did, because you're relating to so much to it here. Again, the story changed a little bit later on, but you're relating so much to it here, and you're learning so much, and you're able to bring it home, and there is so much at Penn in particular. Like maybe that's why you ended up here. As you can see, she's quite spiritual herself, looking for the way that things align and why things make sense.
Maor's vision is to create a vibrant Jewish future led by a new generation that is literate in Jewish wisdom, culture, and heritage, inspired by a deep personal identity, committed to strong Jewish values, and engaged in Jewish community, civic life, and support of Israel. You can find a link to donate in today's show notes, or head to meor.org/donate to help Meor inspire, educate, and empower the next generation of Jewish leaders. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. And there's a lot of experiences on campus that I think really impacted me and I still think about. So, for example, on campus, we also used to go to Shabbat meals, sometimes in the community. And there were families that we visited then that I'm sure for them, they don't think about when they were just like in the kitchen, doing this or that. But as students on campus, you remember kind of every little thing sometimes that people are doing, which I hope doesn't sound creepy, but you you're really taking it all in, especially for this world that in some ways it's a bit foreign. And so when someone's pouring their tea, or when someone's, spending time without their phones on a Saturday morning with their family at home, it's something that really makes an impression on you. When not that I didn't have that, thank God I had a very close family growing up, but the intentionality within it being Shabbos morning and things like that, you really observe and take in everything when you're on the college campus and having these experiences.
So I don't know if everybody listening knows the program itself, but like you had classes and then you'd have a Shabbos experience where you went to a community. So you're describing, were there any, when you went to those homes and you're even staying in the home and, eating meals with different families over Shabbat, were there any specific things that stand out in your memory that like stick with you today?
Um, So there certainly are, and also, this is over 10 years ago, which is crazy. But at different times, going to Shabbat meals at different people's houses, different things have stuck out. But certainly, I think a third part of the MEOR program is writing these journals. And so, in one of my journals, I specifically wrote about the family I had stayed with, which the name escapes me now, but Rabbi Spinkel will remember, a family from Philadelphia. And I think I was writing specifically about that, observing them Shabbos morning. I think they had family visiting. They were all drinking coffee in the kitchen or something along those lines. And I remember writing about how beautiful it was and how much that impacted me. And it's funny because it's something that I think now, I didn't say this earlier in the interview, I am Shabbos observant. I keep Shabbat every week. I think sometimes we can take these moments for granted when you're an outsider coming in and viewing the togetherness and how people are together, it really is such a beautiful thing. And, now I don't think again, you're having me reflect, but thinking about this on my own Shabbos mornings or playing with my children, whatever it may be. But these things really make an impression on someone who's visiting different homes.
That's amazing. That's very cool. Are there any families you want to give a shout out to that
Certainly, there's definitely a few families that particularly like took me in along my own journey. So Kurt and Melissa Stein were like second parents to me. They hosted me for so many holidays before I got married and made a home of my own where I could keep holidays. And I think that's another thing probably for your listeners. I don't know exactly who, but it's people who grow up with Shabbat or with, observant holidays where you need to be in the community where you're observing. I think sometimes it feels so weird to think like inviting yourself to a meal or opening your home for a holiday. And it's a funny thing when you become observant and you then want to start being in an observing community for a holiday because of the access to a shul or kosher food or not use other people who aren't using their phone, whatever it may be. It really is so special when you can create a home environment for someone who doesn't otherwise have it. I would have either been probably alone in my apartment in the city in an environment that just not, my apartment would have been fine, but lonely. I could have been with my family, which would not be an observant environment, or I could go to another family. And so the Steins really took me in that way. And I think that for families that may be listening that do take kids, adults, whatever it may be in for holidays, know that you're really creating a home and that people really may not have other places to go. It's like, it sounds sad. It doesn't have to be a sad thing. It can be an uplifting thing and an opportunity. But it is a really special thing when you have families who are so generous and giving to take you. And also, you mentioned NYU, Rabbi Shmalo. Also, we used to go to his Passover Seder.
amazing? Wow.
He's incredible. But just as families, it's really, I hope it's empowering to think that you really are creating a home for someone, and for someone on the receiving end of it, like myself, is that it really does feel like a home, and we have a lot of gratitude.
It's amazing. No, I myself, it's so funny now because, Passover, it's been a number of years, and Passover every year I have to lead the Seder, and even my parents come, but like everybody turns to me to lead. And I'm like, I miss those days where I can't tell you how much I reference back the few people that took us in as a couple early on, to watch them run their home and run their Seder. Cause now that's like all I have as a model, meaning I didn't necessarily have that same model at home. We were traditional, but it's like it made a huge impact. And now our entire family, all my kids are getting that model as what impacts them as well. So I totally relate to that. It's amazing.
For sure. I feel
Beautiful.
like we're always picking up things from different families. Like, oh, we do this way because of this family, and we want this to look this way because of this family, in like a really beautiful way. And then we obviously have our own traditions as well. But it really means a lot when people do open up their home and create that.
So there's something else that stuck out to me, that you had said, which is that when you first kind of were exposed to Jewish tradition, that you were surprised by some of the behaviors that Judaism espouses. So, like, what stood out to you specifically, and why?
Um, I think there's a lot of things that coming from a world that's Jewish, and all my friends were Jewish, but not necessarily observant on a like minute by minute basis, going to a place where now, living an observant life. There's a lot of differences that I think besides only like the practical of putting on tefillin or making a sukkah, it's sukkahs right now, or whatever it may be, that are just so different. I remember my first I used to describe it as like not a like an extra layer of reality, because yeah, when you don't think about a lot of the values that are part of Judaism, and they're just kind of things that but not necessarily attached to a value, whatever it may be, you kind of speak whatever comes to your mind, right? Like, you're not adding this layer of, is this lashon tov, like speaking good about people? Is this in line with these other mitzvahs that I should be doing? And so it adds this extra layer of thinking twice before you speak, let's say. And that's something simple because everyone is speaking. Another thing that I think about a lot, especially on Shabbos meals with my family, is that when we were having meals growing up, and thank God I have a very wonderful, amazing, close family, and that would be a whole nother podcast. But like, let's say we were having a family meal, there was no idea. There was like food was out, you went and ate it. Like, I don't know, you didn't really think twice about it. And so it was actually quite funny when we first started having my parents for Shabbat meals, and you first, you sing, and then you say brasa, and then you drink wine, and then you drink challah, but like the food is sitting on the table. So that idea in general of delayed gratification, I think, is something that's, again, it doesn't have to be like the biggest, going to pray 3 times a day or what you're wearing that can seem like so jarringly different. But I think a lot of the way that we live our life every day is quite different from, let's say, before, when you're not thinking about these things as much. So like having to look at food for 30 minutes before you're actually eating it is a concept that like does not exist. It's bizarro. So there's a lot, and I'm trying, there's many examples of this, of just this layer of thinking reality, that a lot of times I think we add that bring value to our lives, but that are just so jarringly different from not growing up with, not growing up with, I had values, thank God, growing up, but I didn't have these specific, singing before we ate, let's say.
Sure, and it's like you're saying, it's like a new layer. It's not like you're taking something away, you're just adding a new layer. But I would love for you to specifically, you're mentioning like the powerful thought process of that. Like, what did it do for you once, because you described that you did become more observant over time. So as you started to keep these things, and it still is like this new layer, what did that like contribute or change in your own thinking or approach to living?
Yeah, I mean, that's a quite big question. Like, I think I think that there's I think about this a lot, and I'll give you another example before I answer, right before I answer the question, which is probably annoying as a podcast attendee. But another example of this, I remember thinking that for my own wedding, let's say, my husband's uncle gave a speech and different people gave speeches. And I remember my parents being like glued to what the speaker was saying, right? And if you think about some of the speeches that people say at a Shabbat meal, at a wedding, or, different occasions of Jewish holidays, it sounds funny to say, but they're kind of like motivational speeches, right? Because if they don't have a value or some type of practical takeaway, you're, I don't know, the Devar Torah, as we call it, the words of Torah, probably didn't hit so well, or probably didn't have so much going. So they usually have a practical takeaway of being a better person, or doing something differently, or, having more intention the next time you eat, whatever it may be. And so for my parents, I remember them listening so vividly. They still talk to me about some of the speeches that happened 6 years ago at my wedding, is that you're rarely getting a motivational speech like that in your, like, if you're not observant. Whereas you have people who are going to Shabbat meals every week, and oftentimes you're like falling asleep as they speak. Not that we should be, but we are also. That's another thing we're taking for granted, is these motivational speeches. The reason I mentioned this with regard to the answer to this question is that I think a lot of times there's a lot of things we know we should be doing. We know we should be incorporating. We know we should be thinking about. I even think about this with a lot of professional advice, which obviously I deal with now at the JWE, is like, don't multitask, or the advice you need, like the advice that you hear over and over and over again, and every single time that you hear it, you probably needed to hear it again. It's nothing new. But I think that in an interesting way, having these values or mitzvos or whatever may be attached to it, it actually helps you incorporate them, because you're learning the source for it. You're learning like the different connections that it may have. And so, for example, if you were to ask any normal good person, should you only speak good about people? I think they'd say yes. I think they would. And a lot of people do speak good about people, religious, not religious, Jewish, not Jewish. They really do. But I think that particularly it's helpful when you're tying this idea of speaking good about people as, to this idea of Lashon Tov, and to the other mitzvahs of treating a man, treating your fellow well, and all that, that maybe it allows you to remember it that little bit better. And I think that that goes across a lot of these mitzvahs. Obviously, I'm referring mostly to the mitzvahs that go in these examples between like man and man, or woman and woman, person in person. But I think that it kind of allows you to actually take on some of these good things in a way where maybe you needed to only hear it 3 times rather than 5 times in order for you to remember that you
Mm.
shouldn't speak bad about someone.
So it's sort of, you're describing like it's like a natively built in into the system, like thought pattern interruption. Like a lot of these like self-help things are out there, always shooting for like, how do we get ourselves to like wake up a little bit? But this is like, you have Shabbat every 7 days, maybe 3 times a day. If a person's praying 3 times a day, they have 3 times to take a step back. You have monthly, you have Rosh Chodesh, the first of the month. Like it's sort of like each of these things is a way to wake up a little bit. It sounds like that's what you're describing. Is that fair?
1,000%. And I think that also like at different times of my own learning and journey, and I'm still on a journey, different parts of this connected with me. So like, and I would do different things, like I'm saying, it's not like every area of someone's life you need to connect to every single mitzvah and then try and take it on. But if there's one thing that you connect with, which I'll get to probably in the rapid fire, then you can maybe improve in that area. Like, I like what you said, the thought pattern
Interruption. Yeah.
interruption. But it doesn't have to be in everything at once. But there are different. It is. I don't want to say it's like a Torah is a tool for pop psychology, but
Sure.
there are certain things
Doesn't hurt.
that work.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, so let's do it. This is the quick fire questions. So we call them the 3 questions. So the first one, are you ready?
Mhm.
Yeah. The first one is, what's your favorite piece of Jewish wisdom that has guided you in life?
So I think that what we're just talking about is probably my favorite piece of Jewish wisdom is catch whatever you can catch in that moment. So for example, if you can't take on the world at the moment and there's one mitzvah or one point of connection or one thing you can do to make yourself feel more connected or a better person, whatever it may be, like reach and try to do that one thing rather than letting, perfect be enemy of the good.
Amazing. Okay. Number 2 is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Um, the common advice that people give, specifically where I hear a lot through the JWE, is not to multitask. And I think that's the best piece of advice, both on a large scale and on a small scale. So on the small scale, like I learned recently, I think I used to be able to like look at my text messages and drive a little bit better. Like I've learned recently, I have no multitasking skills. I cannot multitask at all. Like on the small scale, like I can't, if someone's talking to me and I'm in the middle of something else, like it's not going in, there's nothing happening. But I think on the large scale as well is you can multitask and can't be in 2 places at once. So even for my own journey, when I graduated college, I had really actually then wanted to go to Israel and try to learn about Judaism a little bit more. And I ended up going straight into my career. And I think like my head was, my heart was in Israel or was learning a little bit more, and my head and my body were in banking. And I shouldn't wonder about this, but I mean, I do. It's like, what if I just allowed myself to be present and align my head, heart, and body in Israel first, and then come back and go into banking after, and align better. And I think at different points in my life, I've tried to do the things that what I should be doing, what I've been told to do, and aligning, like, let's say my body in one place and my heart in somewhere else. And I think on a large scale, it doesn't work either. So there's always opportunities to come back, try new things. But if your heart is truly, truly somewhere at one point, then it doesn't make sense to try and multitask and be in 2 different places.
Wow. That is a piece of advice I feel like everybody needs to hear every once in a while. That's a great one. Beautiful. Okay. Wow. Last one is, what do you think is the key to realizing your potential?
Um, I don't think I have the answer to that. I hope that my full potential is not realized. And I just want to say, like, I do always view myself as becoming and growing and learning more. And I feel even currently, I feel like I'm learning more and more about myself every day. Um, but I think something that kind of goes with the answer before is allowing yourself to, when you believe in something, to see it through. So this can be as small as my example is that I wanted to go to MIT and become an engineer. My guidance counselor said, "You're political because you're the president, so go to Penn and be political." I was like, sure. Or to big things is that when you really believe in something, just see it through to its end. And I have many stories of both times that I did do that and times that I didn't do that. But it's worth the patience if you really do believe in something, and it will allow you to hopefully reach your potential and continue to build your potential greater.
Okay, I feel like we have enough content to do a whole nother podcast, but we're gonna have to stop it here. This has been really, really incredible. So really thank you for taking the time, Jenna, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime soon.
Thank you so much. No, it's great to be on here, and I really appreciate you reaching out and having me.